The 100th anniversary of the Negro Leagues was in 2020. Unfortunately, that happened to be the year of the COVID, the pandemic. The celebrations of that 100th anniversary, none of them happened.
Out of the shadows and into the light is important to continue this legacy, to advance this legacy for all that it has to offer.
Is to try to celebrate history of humanity, history of people who loved baseball and who played for very little money so that they can enjoy their lives, work a job, and then play baseball. And a lot of that has been forgotten.
Cape May Negro League Conference, while we started it here in 2021, we hope it has legs and continues to become more in the future.
It's important because it extends the values that were engendered by those who played Negro League baseball. And those values are important for not just in terms of sports, but life values. Those values are pride, taking the pure joy in doing what you do and do it well. And that's what these players did. They excelled in a game where they had been excluded. It's about dignity. It's about social justice. It's not just a black history. It's an American history. It's an American story. Not only is there truth in history, but it's truth in advancing the culture, so that those individuals who come after can have a greater understanding of the importance of this particular history, this particular part of sports history. You know, this is a unique history. It was a time when the national pastime was truly baseball. You know, there wasn't any Super Bowl, there wasn't any real NBA. When Jackie breaks the color barrier, you know, it wasn't just simply a baseball moment. It was a moment in history that affected all of us.
Over the years, there have been a number of Negro League conferences. The one in Cape May, New Jersey, focuses on more of the unheralded Negro Leaguers than the superstars like Jackie Robinson, Monty Irvin, or Larry Doby. And that's why the theme of the conference, Out of the Shadows into the Light, that's where that comes from. It was to shine the spotlight on more of the Negro League stars who many people have not heard of.
My dream, as is the dream of many others who have participated in this symposium, from writers and teachers and educators and people who just grew up here and remember baseball as a kid, remember the Philadelphia All-Stars, or remember the Backrack Giants. We're trying to create something where we celebrate the lives of the people in the community around us, and we want to set up a Negro League baseball exhibition for further generations, for people to come and know about their history, just like the Harriet Tubman Museum is set up in Cape May to tell a story, and everyone needs to tell a story. And if you can bring people together and see what people have done through the arts, through paintings, through verbal recordings, through written language, and have something to come to and see like, wow, that's interesting. I didn't know anything about Negro League baseball. I didn't even know that much about baseball. To bring a human story into something which is timeless.
Not only honoring what is the 100th anniversary, but also the integration of the Negro League stats in with Major League Baseball. Early in 2021, MLB announced that they would be combining the stats from the Negro Leagues with other MLB stats. So for example, the last 400 hitter is no longer Ted Williams in 1941. It is now Artie Wilson, who played for the Birmingham Black Barons in 1948. One of the reasons we did the Cape May Negro League Conference is to celebrate the history of the Negro Leagues and to bring out the great pride that the black community should have for some of the people who played in that league. They overcame great odds in order to accomplish what they did, because not only did they overcome the Great Depression and World War II, they overcame a lot of the racism that was here in the United States at that time. And we still have some today. So the Negro League Conference in Cape May tries to provide insight as to why some of these things happened then. You can't do anything about it. What you can do is learn from history. And also the black community can have this sense of pride that whatever they face tomorrow, they have already conquered yesterday.
As most of America was up until the 1950s, segregation was still tantamount all over the country, including Cape May, and you could only be defined in certain areas. Baseball, as you know, didn't become integrated until 1948. So Negro League players, or baseball players, had to have their own leagues, their own teams, because for the most part, that's the community that they could play with. They weren't welcome to play in the major leagues.
For the Negro Leaguers, there were a lot of obstacles.
A semblance of ragtag teams because there was no financial backing for them.
Travel was a main one because they had to travel by bus, and everywhere they went by bus, some cases they were welcome to go into a restaurant and eat. In other places, they either had to eat on the bus, they had to sleep on the bus. The bus really was their home away from home.
So anybody who played baseball or tried to travel to another town had to find their own ways to promote themselves. So this is a labor of love.
That was one of the biggest differences between Negro League baseball and what was known at the time as organized baseball. And just the name organized baseball was a put down to the Negro League. It suggested it might be disorganized, which of course it was not. They played in the same ballparks as the major league teams at that time. They played in Yankee Stadium, Polo Grounds in New York, Griffith Stadium in Washington, D.C., Shibe Park in Philadelphia, Crosley Field in Cincinnati. So they played in the same ballpark as the white ball players. But of course, the fans that went to these games were mostly black fans. So the Negro League player had to overcome lower pay, the inconvenience of a lot of the travel, but they still knew, doing what they did, playing baseball, they were just as good as their white counterparts. And finally, after Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in 1947, they got a chance to prove that.
If they were lucky, they made a couple dollars. Maybe they charged to get to play, but I think for the most part, this was their obsession, this was their outlet, this is the way that they could show what they could do with skills, because most of the time their jobs were of menial labor and they were not prominent in the society. People went to do this because they loved to play baseball.
The Negro League ball players made the most of what they had. They did not see playing in the Negro Leagues as inferior to playing in the major leagues. In fact, their view was if we could play, if we're good enough to play in the Negro Leagues, we're good enough to play in the majors. They also didn't see themselves as victims. They saw what they were doing as fun. It gave them a way of seeing the rest of the country. And even though parts of the country where they went to, they were segregated, they had to abide by the local segregation laws, they still made the most of those opportunities. So when you talk to any of the Negro Leaguers about their careers and ask them if they had any regrets, almost to the man, they will tell you, no, we didn't have any regrets. I remember asking Artie Wilson that question, and you might remember that Artie Wilson is the last 400 hitter. He hit 402 in 1948 for the Birmingham Black Barons. He had a cup of coffee. That means a brief stint in the majors. Artie Wilson, I asked him, do you have any regrets? He said, no, I do it all over again. And then he stopped and said, yes, I have one regret, and that is that Josh Gibson didn't get a chance to hit in the major leagues. And that was his one regret. Had nothing to do about him, had to do with Josh Gibson. One of the things I think that we can do with this conference is do more than what they're doing with the National Negro League Museum in Kansas City or the Southern League Museum in Birmingham, Alabama. And that is incorporate artwork. There's a very fine artist named Sidney Smith Jordan who's done some wonderful works on some of the Negro League stars. And also Cape May has the Cape May Theater. And I'm hoping that there will be some plays that feature some of the Negro League stars. In other words, go beyond just the museum and do some other things that incorporate all the great stories that come out of the Negro Leagues and its stars.